Hey everybody, this is Chris Thompson, and welcome to session number 35 of Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel. He's broken 6 bones on his own body, Adam Sutherland's ankle, and my baby finger, which he still claims was an accident.
It was an accident.
Welcome to Hypnosis as a Martial Art. Here he is, Dr. Mike.
Yes, Christopher, it was an accident. And it was an accident when I broke Adam's ankle, too. But it's a jiu-jitsu class. These things happen.
I know it was an accident when you broke Adam's ankle, but because it was my baby finger, I just can't believe it.
It's more significant to you, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. No, I know it really was an accident. All right, where do you want to go today? We have lots of stuff to talk about.
I want to start by just sort of pre-framing that we need to talk about threshold a bit because I had indicated, and this is my initial wonderful admission of guilt here, that I'm going to make a rare admission of failure to my listening audience worldwide.
But you're admitting it, so it's okay.
I'm admitting it, so it's okay, yes. I was planning on putting my UFC shot up on the website on June 21st, which is about a month away from the recording of this. It's not going to happen. I'm going to have to back it up to the fall. And the reason it's not going to happen is I am going on a deficit of 2 hours sleep a night right now. I have been for weeks since we got the new Bengal kitten. But on top of that, as Chris knows, a very dear friend of ours is in the hospital with an extremely severe disorder and it's causing all kinds of stress. Chaos has a way of intruding into our plans, so I've been off the rails with my eating and exercise plan. And I don't want to gross anyone out by putting any photographs off until they are amazing. So I apologize to all of you who are just sitting there with bated breath looking forward to this. But believe me, you should find something else to do with your life. Now, we are talking about threshold. And the point of threshold, remember, Chris, something has to change. It has to be now and it has to be me.
Yep.
We cannot force threshold. So right now, I know I'm eating badly because of all the stresses and stuff in my life. I'm using food as a drug, so I'm saying to my listeners right now, our listeners, do what I say, not what I do.
Exactly.
I go to Burger King Whoppers and coffee double, cream and sugar, all this stuff when I'm under a lot of stress to change my state. And I'm using food as a drug. But it's better that than crack cocaine or something, I guess.
Like the mayor of Toronto. Oh, wait, no, I didn't say that.
He didn't say that. We'll edit that out. If anyone's following the news, they know that one. But I'm not at threshold. I'm not at threshold yet. And I can tell I'm not at threshold. And I know I have to change. Something has to change. It has to be me. But I'm missing part 3. It has to be now.
Exactly.
And
that's usually what's missing.
Yeah, very often the case. But I've also seen something has to change. It has to be now.
But it doesn't have to be me.
Right. It has to be my spouse or it has to be my job or something like that. So I apologize. I'm not at threshold yet, but I will be. And I've been asked to push other people through threshold numerous times over the years, and it never works. I was categorizing in my head and cataloging the number of times other people have asked me to intervene in a third party's life. Problems in the marriage, problems with, drug abuse, all sorts of things. And it's about 9 or 10 times with various couples or friends of friends or relatives of friends, and people always said the same line, I know he'll listen to you, Mike. Mm-hmm. If you just talk, I said, he's not going to listen. Oh, it won't hurt to try. And my track record is absolutely 0. I'm no good at intervening in other people's lives if they're not at threshold.
So just to make sure I understand here, what you're saying is if somebody comes up to you and says, my sister really needs to change.
Right.
If the sister herself came to you, then
that would be great.
Let's say she's not at threshold, you can certainly help her get there.
Right.
But if it's the third party saying, I need you to help me help my sister. Well,
can you have a meeting with her?
Mm-hmm.
I had one where a friend's wife, a friend and his wife were splitting up, and it was a very sad situation, and she was running around on him, and I got the whole call from an external person. Oh, if you just talk to her, she'll smarten up and realize. And I drove 2 hours north of Toronto and met with her and talked to her for 4 hours, and she seemed, yeah, you're right, and I got to get back into my marriage and, make the effort and all this. This is wrong what I'm doing. It's going to cause problems for the kids and all these things. And she went right back and ran away with the other guy. And I just wasted a day, and I'm not being heartless, but we cannot change other people.
And you can't want things for other people. I mean, you can, but
it's not going to do it.
It's not going to cause any outcome that's beneficial for you.
So you've got to fulfill threshold. Something's got to change. It's got to be now, and it's got to be me. And you can't force other people to get to that point. Sometimes, I think the problem is problems on the outside. We're looking at someone else. It can seem so overwhelmingly obvious. And I'm thinking of someone you and I know, Chris, and I won't say the name because we'd have to edit it out. Mm-hmm. But this is a life where someone is out of control and could definitely make some positive changes and have a much better life but it's not going to happen. We can't change it just because we want it to happen.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of which, you know what? This is a perfect opportunity. So one of our mutual friends wasn't last week. It was about 3 weeks ago or so. And she was sitting at the pub with us. And I won't mention her name just because, well, she probably doesn't want us to. But she was looking to make a change in her career. Wasn't happy with her job.
Oh, yes.
And she'd been unhappy for quite a while. And so after listening to her talk about this again, not a complaining sort of way, but just, look, I need to move forward. I have to figure out what I want to do.
This was really nice. I remember you doing this.
And I said to her, and I felt like a bit of an a-hole for saying it, but I had to say it, and I said it nicely. How are you going to feel when we have this exact same conversation next year?
And that did it.
The next day, we all got an email from her announcing that she was quitting her job. She didn't have another job to go to yet. And I was so pleased to see this because
she's got the resources to carry herself
absolutely.
over.
Absolutely. I mean, you cannot let fear freeze you. I'm looking for a better word than freeze.
Crash and burn?
You can't let fear stop you from taking the steps that you know you need to take. There's only so much that can go wrong if you were to leave your job. You can always get another one. And in this case, just saying to her, how are you going to feel next year when we have this exact same conversation? That triggered it.
Yeah, I remember that. I've heard her debrief that, and she's made it very clear that was the turning point for her.
She said that to us last night.
Yep. And so let's hope that everybody listening, how are you going to feel when you hear us say this exact same thing in the podcast next year? So we get millions of people worldwide run out and quit their jobs immediately.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So anything else you want to say on Threshold?
No, I'm just saying, like, if you're not there, it's not going to happen. You can't force people into Threshold. You can offer all kinds of things like Chris did, which was that interesting future pace. What you feel like next year if we have the same conversation. Mm-hmm. But she is still free to accept or reject what he said. Fortunately, she was at the point that was appropriate. Yeah. But by and large, I've found many, many times you'll run your head against a wall trying to get people to change.
This is probably a good time to mention that since this is a hypnosis podcast, what I
80%.
did there wasn't technically hypnosis. There was no trance induction. There was no suggestion. But I forced her, by saying what I said, to go inside and make a mental image. And then that triggered Threshold. And so my point in bringing this up is that every aspect of communication in some way can be hypnotic. Whether or not it's formal hypnosis, it's still effective communication at the core. That's what this all comes down to.
And by and large, we'll run into all sorts of people who make all kinds of claims. Well, this isn't hypnosis, and you can't do this, and this state means that. And people seem to be attempting now to divide it more and more finely as to what it is and what it isn't. And
we say, who cares?
Yeah, I really don't care. The test of a model is whether or not it's useful. That's the only test of a model. And all of these hypnotic models, whether it's the law of psychic relative exclusion, Raphael Rhodes, or whether it's, Erickson's unconscious learning, and all of these different things, it really doesn't make any difference. It's whether or not they're useful. I don't want to sit like an academic and do countless experiments and write endless papers on research and whether or not it's a trance, or if it can be discovered instantly that someone can do this and they can change that, but it's not the same trance that Erickson thought, or Dave Ellman was wrong, because I don't care. The bottom line is, what model do you want to adopt at any given time, and what results will you get? And I change my hypnosis models over and over. I'll just use the one it needs that's required for some specific purpose.
Right. You've said before that if you only have one model, then you're stuck. If you only have two, then you have
Then you're
limited,
in a dilemma.
Yeah.
If you only two models of the world, you have a dilemma. You decide between the two. You become the metaphorical donkey stuck between two piles of hay that starves to death because he can't decide which one is appropriate for him to eat. And then if you have three models of the world, you now have choice. And it's good with hypnosis to have multiple models you can switch in and out of.
Mm-hmm. And if you get too many, then of course you're just stuck in this.
Well, then, Edward de Bono said there comes a point that more information is not useful. Mm-hmm. It will just bog you down. And that's one of the dangers of people who are really good researchers. They will always be looking for more and more information to either confirm their bias or to challenge it. And they will never have that sense of closure. They won't have an exit strategy that will stop the search for information. You have to have an exit strategy. So you say, I now have enough to do what I need to do.
Exactly. And now that is going to carry us into a discussion of one of the things we plan to talk about today is the 4 waves of hypnosis. However, before we do, we want to make sure that you all are reminded. July 8th to 12th in Toronto, we have
still space left.
There is space left, and this is the intensive 5-day Architecture of Hypnosis course that Mike's teaching. And this is the 5-day straight course, so it's not run over dual weekends like the last one was in April. This is great for those of you who are traveling in from out of town. And we don't know when we're holding the next 5-day intensive course, so I would recommend you sign up for this one. July is a beautiful time of year in Toronto, right down at the University of Toronto, St. Michael's College.
Gorgeous part of the city, near museums, art galleries, opera, culture, great restaurants. It's a fabulous city. It's probably the most cosmopolitan, multicultural city of 3 million people in the world. It's got a safe, clean public transit system, and we will teach you the best 5-day hypnosis course you can imagine. We still get emails from people who took the last one, and they're just loving it.
Now, I was collecting feedback from people and reading it, and it is incredible. The number of people who say this similar thing, and this, in thinking about how we're going to market our online hypnosis training, I started looking at this going, you know what? What people are getting from you, Mike, is not just that they're learning about hypnosis, but what no one else is really teaching, because they don't have the background you have, is how it all ties in with effective communication for all aspects of life, all the different areas of communication that you teach. So even if people never thought, oh, I would like to be a hypnotist, they come out of this class with communication skills that are top-notch that they never knew they were missing.
And congruence, and all sorts of new resources. And we work therapeutically with everybody in the class. Everybody gets positive changes, powerful changes that last.
I know. That's part of my... one of the favorite parts of the course for me is just watching people come in, and you can kind of calibrate people when you're watching them discuss why they're there on the first day. And sometimes they won't reveal all of the details, but you can see that there's something nagging at them they're hoping to have resolved. And by the end, the change is remarkable, because we do so much trance work that people get to do content-free work if they don't want to talk about their issues. It's remarkable.
Yes, and not to beat a dead horse, but this is a very comprehensive hypnosis course. So if you're a very skilled hypnotist already, I can get you to the next level. I can. And if you're a brand new person to hypnosis, if you've never studied it, maybe read a book about it, saw it on TV, this is the course for you too. We throw all of you together, and within a couple of days, you will not know who the advanced people were and who the beginners were. Everybody's working at the same amazing level.
Yeah, that was the comment that Michael emailed us in yesterday.
From Minnesota.
Yes, and that was fantastic. He is quite a skilled hypnotist. In fact, I noticed on the very first day of training, he had an excellent hypnotic voice, very
wonderful
congruent,
language skills,
really super guy. In fact, he's an Australian guy living in the States now.
Right.
Fantastic. Love this guy. But his comment was, by the 4th day, you couldn't tell anymore who were the beginners.
Right,
so that was awesome.
We just downloaded into your brain. So come out and study with us. July, check our website and come and take the Architecture of Hypnosis course with me and Chris in Toronto at the University of Toronto. You'll have the time of your life, and you'll learn stuff you will not believe.
End of commercial. All right, let's get on with the discussion of the 4 waves of hypnosis. So, Mike, let's hear from you. What are the waves?
Well, the initial wave started back with the Egyptian and Greek sleep temples and so on, and culminated with Mesmer and Charcot and some of the people like James Esdale who were practicing mesmerism. So we're talking back to the initial phase, the inchoate form of hypnosis, where people were making magnetic passes over each other and endeavoring to induce trance that way. That was mesmerism. And then the second wave hit with people like Braid and Bramwell and other very direct hypnotists like George Estabrook Selman and so on, who moved away from this magnetic current theory and began using focused attention, sometimes pendulums, things of that nature to captivate attention, eye fixation. And these were then used in a very directive form to cause people to go into trance. And that hovered around for quite a long time. That was a long wave.
Now, let me just interrupt you there. The mesmerism method, that was essentially discredited and proven to be a focused state of attention, right?
It pretty well was. I mean, I do think there is something to energetic psychology. I've seen it work too many times in ways I can't explain. And you can definitely determine that there are acupuncture points with different skin galvanic response and so on that shows different skin electrical potential in the areas that the acupuncture points traditionally are placed at. Mm-hmm. So there is something to it. But the whole idea of moving magnetic currents through the person's body with your hands and that resulting in trance, I think it was much more indirect suggestion that was causing that than something energetic.
So the reason I brought it up is I wanted you to discuss how we went from this mesmerism approach to the direct approach. People, obviously, who were involved in the direct method had a theory that, it wasn't moving magnetic waves with your hands, or it was something else,
yes,
right?
I mean, even the Royal Commission that investigated Mesmer and his claims of magnetic currents and animal magnetism and so on proved, under the direction of people like Benjamin Franklin and Lavoisier, the chemist, that there was nothing that they could measure that was happening. They thought it was just imagination, as Franklin said. So that went through an entire phase of people were only imagining and it was just suggestion. And people like James Braid came along and said, yes, it seems to be focusing of the eyes that causes eye fatigue that creates trance. And that was sort of the dominant viewpoint for some time. And then people began to realize you didn't really have to focus the eyes. You could wrap your mind around an idea. Just focusing attention could also be used to limit input and to limit external awareness and begin to put people into a nice state where they're much more aware of the internal shifts and things that are going on. And they were creating trance through focusing attention, which led us to the third wave, which, of course, was Milton Erickson, who was extremely directive at first. And he said in his latter years he was much too directive in the beginning. But towards the end, he began offering options. And as you sit there and feel all those wonderful sensations, which may or may not be the sort of thing that's appropriate for you to change now. And he's, doing embedded commands and all of these things that Bandler and Grinder quantified and codified and made clear. So Erickson moved it away from this very directive, focused attention thing to a much more subtle, gentle, maternal approach that offered people options and gave them essentially no opportunity to fail, which is what made it so clever. It's also noteworthy, Chris, that Erickson wasn't that good, according to most people today.
Yeah,
I don't know if I can say most, but according to many hypnotists, he's been largely discounted. And this is what I call the Bruce Lee phenomena.
Yeah,
everybody was scared to death of Bruce Lee until the day he died. And 10 minutes after Bruce Lee died, everybody realized they could have beaten him, and so could their grandmother, and he was no good at all. The same thing essentially happened with Erickson. Some people call him the purple pumpkin, and said that, because he wore purple suits and stuff and sat in a wheelchair. It's kind of cruel, but he had an impact like no one else in hypnosis. None of us living today will ever do anything in hypnosis that's going to equal what he did. And all you have to do is read his 4-volume collected papers to realize the depth of his understanding. So he offered these subtle, gentle, conversational approaches to hypnosis that became sort of the cutting edge of its day.
Yeah.
And that was our third wave.
Yeah. Okay. So then you and I have been talking quite a bit over the last couple of months about the fourth wave.
Right. And fourth wave hypnosis is hypnosis that we're seeing now through people like Anthony Jacquin, who I really respect, who's doing a lot of work with no induction at all. And I knew this was possible in the beginning. I didn't know it to the degree I understand it or think I understand it now. But back in 1975, my entire hypnotic method was just repeated testing. So I'd get people's hands to lock, people's fingers to move together, people's eyes to be locked shut, and then have automatic movement where they couldn't stop their hands spinning. And then we'd just go right into throwing suggestions at them with no supposed sleep state, not even any relaxation back then.
No formal change
but
of
not even
state.
Getting them to relax.
Yeah.
It was only when I started seeing people like, Gil Eagles when I was much younger, and some other hypnotists like Terry Stokes, and I saw they were using a lot of relaxation, causing people to slump all over the place. And I liked the look of that, so I added that later. Mm-hmm. But it was really window dressing. And the funny thing is, I can remember a very early hypnosis performance I did in 1975 in Palmerston, Ontario. I remember where it was because it was such a dark moment, Chris. I remember having 30 people on stage in a crowded auditorium of high school kids one evening and saying, hey, lock your hands in front of you, and on the count of 3, you won't be able to get your hands apart no matter how hard you try. And 1, 2, 3, and this had been just going like gangbusters for several months, and 30 people just took their hands apart and looked at me.
Oh,
and
wow.
The rest of the evening is a horrible blank. I don't go messing around there. Now, what happened was because I wasn't doing an induction, back in those days, I had not yet determined, because I was doing no induction, what was essential to create this state, if there was a state, and what was simply window dressing. And I left out things that were essential and kept in things that were window dressing. And eventually sorted through them and found that if I did this, 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 and this, according to Weitzenhofer, I got heteroaction and people would go into trances right away, even though there was no relaxed state in it. So now, in that circumlocutory fashion, what I basically said is the stuff that Anthony Jacquin is doing, and also clever stuff that Fraser Parker is doing, we're seeing hypnotic phenomena with no induction, where the person is being very, very cleverly psychologically shifted, and it's very, very difficult to even explain what they're doing, but the use of language is causing hypnotic phenomena, even though there is no hypnosis per se. But then again, we're back to Clark Hall, right? Anything that assumes trance causes trance. Mm-hmm. So are we just...
And testing for hypnosis
causes hypnosis. So are we doing the, creating cataleptic limb and using that limb now to have a trance by default? Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. But this is the fourth wave, and I find it fascinating, the hypnotic methodologies of no hypnosis. And you remember we were practicing, and we sent one of the photographs or two of the photographs to Anthony Jacquin. He found it interesting. We were testing all of this at the University of Toronto for the Architecture of Hypnosis course in April, and we got the photograph of Dr. Leno's hand stuck on a coat rack, and he couldn't let go of it. No, he's not hypnotized, but he couldn't let go of it. And
was he hypnotized? I mean, this was actually going to be my question for you: is the fourth wave? It sounds to me like all of this has been around forever, since hypnosis essentially began. Well, maybe not during the mesmerism phase, but when suggestibility tests, for example, started happening, when you started doing those without an induction in 1975, that was the fourth wave too. It's just that we didn't call it that. It's been codified better. It's been modeled, maybe
streamlined even
more effectively modeled and described. And I think
it's been improved too.
In my mind, what this does is broaden the definition of what hypnosis is.
Well, yeah,
and it is not necessarily this relaxed, slumped over, sleep-like state or anything
maybe it's
like
not
that.
Any state at all.
Yeah,
and the whole point of this, automatic imagination model is basically stating that you can get the mind imagining something and then get it to forget that it's imagining it. And then it proceeds automatically and continues. So one of the questions I had was, well, what are we to do with something like Erickson saying that all hypnotic phenomena, whether it's cataleptic limbs, cataleptic eyelids, time distortion, amnesia, all of these different things, that they don't have to be suggested, but occur naturally concomitant with deep trance. In other words, they're a natural part of trance. And the response I get wasn't really a satisfactory one to me. The response was something along the lines of, well, maybe these people heard about those things through some other hypnotist or somewhere else, and that's why they did them. But we then have to take it back to where it began, which is Pisagur, who was the French mesmerist. And remember, when they did mesmerism, would pass their hands over people, they would convulse and go nuts, to use the medical term.
After like 2 hours of hand waving.
Maybe, and sometimes quicker. But this one particular patient that Pisagur was working with had never seen this. So instead, his expression became blank, his face became flaccid, his breathing shifted, his eyes became staring, the blink reflex disappeared. He looked like a sleepwalker, so Pisagur called him a somnambulist. He called the state somnambulism because he thought it was like sleepwalking. So here we have someone exhibiting deep trance phenomena without any possible way of having heard of it in advance, and it was unsuggested. So here's what I'm basically saying. I'm not questioning this artificial imagination model. I'd held to the human Givens theory that hypnosis is the REM state being hacked into when we're not physically asleep. And this has shaken that up too. So now I'm back to multiple models depending who I'm working with and what I'm working with. And just like I said, when I did the forensic case with Durham Regional Police and they brought the young lady over who was robbed at the McDonald's restaurant, and she wanted, to know where my swinging locket was. And, so I just met her model of the world, got a swinging locket from my wife's drawer, swung it a couple of times, and she was totally tranced out. And Bandler wrote that up in one of his books. And he calls me a Canadian hypnotist, but he doesn't give my name. But I forgive you, Richard. In any case, that met her model of the world. So I would switch to that model for her. Mm-hmm. Whereas dealing with someone who'd maybe never experienced hypnosis before, I might use one of these fourth wave models that just shocks or jars or has someone imagine going into trance. And if you want to try this yourself, the thing I love about it, I was looking at Anthony Jacquin's stuff, and he said, basically, you imagine that your hand is stuck to the table, and that you imagine that it's happening automatically and that you can't remove it. And then you imagine that you don't know that you're the one doing it. And just see if anything pulls you out of the experience. And it's like, well, I keep remembering that I'm the one doing it. So then you imagine that you don't keep remembering it, you're the one doing it. You just imagine that each thing that pulls you out isn't happening.
It's almost like layers of dissociation.
Oh, definitely is. Definitely is. And my comment was, this reminds me very much of something I've been doing for years and never really thought about. I thought of it as purely a clever linguistic trick, which is, pretend you're going deeper into trance or whatever, and pretend you're not pretending anymore, which is essentially the same thing.
Actually, Mike, this is a good time. I wanted to ask you a question, something that I was thinking about recently. The word pretend, to me, implies that you're going to be consciously aware that you're, like, let's say you're working with a subject and you want to practice something in hypnosis class, and you could just say to the subject, well, even if it doesn't work, just pretend that it's working. Or you could say imagine. And I think that the word imagination implies more of an unconscious process.
Well, let me just go right to my iPhone 5 here, because my Merriam-Webster dictionary says pretend, to give a false appearance of being, possessing, or performing. And another example is to make believe, to feign,
these are kind of conscious.
To claim or represent or assert falsely, to feign an action, part, or role, or especially in a play, or to put in a claim. And a synonym is to assume. So whether we say we pretend it or we imagine it, it doesn't really matter because the results tend to be the same. So you might want to just pretend that none of this is relevant to your life.
So pretend it doesn't matter.
And then pretend you aren't pretending anymore.
I love the line, pretend you're not pretending, sounds a lot more smoother than imagine you're...
more smoother.
No, I was correcting remember on the last, a couple podcasts ago, I said, how do you know when to say more smooth or smoother or bigger or more big? Like examples like that. And I ended up looking it up, and it depends on how many syllables there are in the word and whether it ends in a Y and all that. But it should be smoother, not more smooth. So I was correcting myself. I was not being,
more smoother.
I was not being extra redundanter.
Oh, you're making me cringe.
All right, so
what are you saying about the pretend?
Pretend you're not pretending sounds a lot better, a lot smoother than imagine you're not imagining.
Yeah,
you would agree.
Right. You're right.
And I think that's why. Anyway, it's a great line. So credit to you for that one.
There's all kinds of models in these 4 ways of hypnosis. And I don't know what the 5th wave is going to be.
Yeah, but
see, there's people trying to revive mesmerism now. Have you seen that?
Yeah, it's utterly.
it's basically you got a Lamborghini.
It's fascinating,
and you're trying to get everybody to sell it and go out and buy a Ford Model T.
Yeah, we know we can create hypnosis essentially instantly. So let's go back to a time when it takes an hour.
Well, I think, Chris, you and I should be more cutting edge than that. We're going to take it even further back than Mesmer. We're going to get a sleep temple happening here and fill it full of snakes. And get everyone worshiping Asclepius.
Because then we can teach like a 3-month hypnosis class.
Awesome,
where all
provided
they
don't get bitten. Yeah, and all they get is an installed snake phobia.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, enough of that.
Let's see what's next here. We got an email from a listener in France. This was wonderful.
Oh yes, this is extremely medically detailed.
And he gave us his whole medical history. And I'm not going to refer to him by name here, but the short version is, thank you so much for your podcast, because I started learning how to do self-hypnosis, learned how to put myself in the Esdale state, and I was diagnosed as bipolar 10 years ago. I think
and he was a medical student at the time.
Yeah, and he had to drop out of medical school for whatever reason, medical related. And anyway, him learning how to do self-hypnosis, he said that over the last 2 weeks, he's had essentially a massive breakthrough in reducing his symptoms just by using the Esdale state.
Well, I think that's fantastic. It doesn't surprise me, is what I said to him. The Esdale state is, if it exists.
So for the people who aren't listening, what is the Esdale state?
The Esdale state, again, now I know some of you are going to want to take me to task over this. Well, there is no state. We're just offering you a model here. The Esdale state is essentially below somnambulistic trance, and it's a state where one gets general unsuggested anesthesia, unsuggested catalepsy, and refuses to move or respond in any way that would take any effort.
In other words, it's so comfortable you just couldn't
be bothered. And they're very relaxed and very comfortable. They will not obey any instructions for physical action. because too much trouble. Now, I've been there. I put myself in the SDL state once through self-hypnosis. It's an amazing experience. We do it routinely with our Architecture of Hypnosis course so people can experience it or create it for someone else. And it's a lot of fun. This man has used it therapeutically, and it doesn't surprise me because it is a very, very powerful state. I think it was Dr. Peter Brown who said that trance is, of its very nature, in and of its nature, therapeutic. Even if you're not giving suggestions, it's just good for you. And so the SDL state, which is such a deep trance, would seem to be the most therapeutic and relaxing and beneficial of all. Some people say the states below that. I've seen no evidence whatsoever. But this brings us to a whole other thing here, Chris, which is labeling. And I'm going to offer only my opinion here. I'm not a medical doctor. My opinion is very often we have fallen into a rather crass medical model, which can be traced back to the onset of antibiotics against infection, the use of antibiotics. Now, penicillin was initially discovered, and of course it destroyed things like gonorrhea and syphilis and pneumonia, certain types of pneumonia and so on. And what happened was the medical model became every disease has a medicine that should be thrown at it. Whereas before, people applied a lot of natural means like, hot water and massage and all kinds of other things, sweat boxes and herbs. And now it became there's a pharmaceutical cure for everything.
Here's a pill, take it.
Here's a pill, take it. In order to give a pill to everybody, you need to then have a label you can put on them first. So you have things like the DSM-4, which I think is DSM-5 now, which is a show of hands. You have a bunch of psychiatrists and doctors sitting around. We say, well, we got a new drug. Let's call this new thing kangaroo jumping syndrome. How many people? So they literally raise their hands and vote on it. And then they put kangaroo jumping syndrome in the new DSM. And when that's in there, you now have a drug to throw at it.
Yep.
And the problem with that is people get all kinds of labels. And anyone who does any NLP will tell you a label is a stuck state. If you are labeled as having rage syndrome, you have rage syndrome. You have a thing now. Well, what if you just have a terrible temper that you need to control?
Yeah.
You're not, my opinion, all this is my opinion, is that people are not born with psychopharmaceutical deficiencies.
Exactly.
Like vitamin deficiencies. A friend of mine, his mother can really act very bizarre on occasion. And she one day just excused it and said, well, you got to let me off the hook because I've got, it used to be called manic depressive. Now it's bipolar. She said, because I am bipolar. And he said, Mom, how is being bipolar any different from being a doot? And he said the word. And she didn't have an answer. I think a lot of this stuff, a lot of this labeling gets people stuck. It gets them on medication. It causes them to avoid taking responsibility for their lives and for their states. I mean, Chris, you and I both read a really interesting article about parenting and ADD and ADHD.
It was I don't remember all of the details, but this was literally yesterday. We both read it. And because it came from a Google alert on the word hypnosis. Anyway, Psychology Today. And it was an article about ADHD diagnosis, or attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and French kids, and how French kids in France, get diagnosed with this far, far less, and that the method of dealing with it is totally different than normal Western medicine in the United States or Canada. Instead of throwing a drug at it, they treat it. They treat it, exactly, so sociologically. And they look at the family dynamics, and they look at the root cause of it. Now, what Mike and I here, I think it's safe to lump my opinion in with you here, as I agree with you.
Yeah, we can share a jail cell.
We are not saying that bipolar or any of these other things don't exist.
So save your emails.
But if, let's say, a normal, healthy person was told he or she had bipolar, this label
is bipolar.
Yeah, you
not becomes
are.
Identity.
That's right. Very associative, right? You are it. You identify with it. That label essentially opens the door to what psychologists call learned helplessness, right? And if you have that label attached to you and you own it, well, guess what? You got all kinds of problems.
That's your reality tunnel now, and you will live it. You will live it out, absolutely. I treated a lot of ADD and a lot of ADHD with some kids from Toronto Sick Children's Hospital, and it's probably the premier children's hospital in the world. I spoke to a world-class pediatrician, and he told me that he had so many patients on Ritalin and Dexedrine and all these other amphetamine-type drugs for treating ADD and ADHD. And I said, how do you feel about that? He said, I hate it. And I said, well, why are they on it? The parents want them on it? He said, no, they hate it too. He said, the teachers are prescribing it. Teachers were sending home a form saying your son or daughter, usually the son, is ADD or ADHD. And my theory here, my opinion, is they have attempted, the ubiquitous they have attempted to medicate little boys into being little girls. Oh, he's boisterous. He's bouncing around. Newsflash, he's got testosterone.
Exactly.
He's got a penis. He's a little boy. Can we say penis?
Sure.
In that context. Okay.
Sure,
We will not edit that out. And he's boisterous. He's jumping around. Yeah, he's a little boy. You can't turn him into a little girl by giving him drugs and make him tractable.
Yeah. So anyway, in short, there are people who have some of these labels, who are given these labels. Some of them probably have genuine issues that justify some sort of medication.
Absolutely.
But the vast majority, my hallucination, I can't even speak today. My hallucination is the majority of these do not, and they're being labeled as a way to just justify, oh, well, they have this problem, so here's a drug for it.
And here's today's empowering question based on that. And let this resonate with you hypnotically. What label have you been forced to wear? And how is it limiting the quality of your life? And what are you going to accomplish by discarding it? What is that label that someone else or even you have caused yourself to wear? How is it limiting your life? And how will the quality of your life radically improve when you shed that label as a stuck state?
What a wonderful, wonderful, empowering question. All right, so do you have a closing metaphor for us?
I do, Chris. This is the story of the Tiddlywinks. When I was a very young kid, I had all kinds of cool toys at Christmas. My parents doted on me. I was the youngest of two. My sister is 7 years older than me. And consequently, they would buy me lots of cool stuff. And as a kid, I got the usual soldiers and toy farms and guns and Winchester rifles and things that fired arrows. And there was all sorts of, we were really marketed to us. We had marketed to us by commercials, all kinds of guns. I mean, Johnny 7 and Big Bertha and all these amazing guns that fired things at ships and stuff. Basically, children were just sold these remarkably violent toys. And, you work that out of your system anyway. I had a friend, John, who was not allowed to play guns at all, or anything like that. His father wouldn't buy them for him. And so they just made their own out of sharp sticks and stuff, which were far, far more dangerous and wound up playing the same games anyway. But the bizarre thing is, one of the most precious things I had as a kid was free in a box of cereal. It was a box of Captain Crunch, and inside was a little red plastic container with a set of Tiddlywinks in it. And one of the clearest memories I have of my mother is her giving me those little Tiddlywinks out of that thing. And I used to play them and snap, and they pop across the room. And my mom looked at me, and I don't know why, I have this really clear memory of her looking me in the eyes. I was a very little kid and saying, "Don't ever lose it." And somehow, Chris, over the years, I lost the Tiddlywinks.
Thanks for listening to Brain Software with Dr. Mike Mandel, session number 35. Reminder, check out the July 8th to 12th Architecture of Hypnosis intensive 5-day course, MikeMandelHypnosis.com/class. That's going to get you to the sign-up page. And September 7th, handwriting analysis course. You can, actually, we don't have a page up on the website for that, but what I've been telling people is email us, info@MikeMandelHypnosis.com, and when we go live for the sign-up, early bird notifications are going to go out to those who have emailed us first. Always go over to iTunes, leave a rating for the show. We'd love it if you could actually write a review of the podcast. Just leave your honest comments, and that'll help this podcast be shared with more people. Until then, enjoy your life, enjoy everything about your day, and kick some butt.
Make it count. Probably the most remarkable moment for me was just after the war. We were down at Blades Club, just off the Strand, and Bryce Morgan was there, and Fitzwadsworth Smythe, and we were organising a bridge tournament. And we were all rather good at bridge. Bryce Morgan, a bit of a joker. And we were sitting there, we'll play tomorrow night. And we were having brandy and cigars. And you're up against Harry Squatter came in. And he said, you're coming out for the bridge tournament tomorrow. And he said, I like that. As we told him the time, we said, bring your own deck of cards with you. Everyone must bring a deck of cards. And he said, I'll buy some. And we sat about. We were just determined. Funniest damn thing. whatever cards he brought, we were going to say they were the wrong sort. That's the sort of joke we did. And Bryce Morgan set the whole thing up, of course. He was a bit of a joker. Anyway, Henry Squatter came in the night of the tournament. He was wearing a brand new suit he'd put on. He looked like a monkey that had a shave. And he wandered in the room. And Bryce Morgan said, have you got the brandy? He said, oh, am I supposed to bring brandy as well? He said, well, we'll let you off this time. Let's have a look at the deck of cards. And he put them on the table, and Morgan said, those are blueback cards, you fool. He said, well, what's wrong with that? He said, we only play with redback cards here. Get another pack. So Squatter ran downstairs, looking for a shop that was still open, and Bryce Morgan put a layer of marbles on the stairs. The funniest damn thing. Squatter ran back in. He cleared about 8 steps without hitting any, and then slipped on the marbles. Broke his jaw. The funniest damn thing. He had his head bandaged up and his jaw was wired together for nearly 12 weeks. It's the sort of chap he was.